As a night train conductor, I survived 5 unbelievable rules, but one secret shatters reality. I never should have opened that door. The one that led to the basement. The moment I swung it wide, a chill flooded over me. It wrapped around my neck, tightened its grip like a noose. My routine was simple. Morning coffee brewed, the rumble of steel wheels beneath me, the comforting rhythm of the train in the dark. But this night, something felt off. The air was thick, heavy with an unshakable dread. I could almost taste a metallic tang that clung to my tongue. As I descended the creaking stairs, the darkness swallowed me whole. The lights flickered overhead, casting long, ghostly shadows that danced across the walls. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. I paused, listening. There was a whisper, soft yet urgent, urging me to turn back. "This isn't safe," it seemed to say, echoing in my head. That I took another step, my heart racing. A shiver crawled down my spine. I could smell damp wood, the musk of forgotten places. And then a soft thud, like something shifting behind me. Panic tightened in my chest. My breath quickened. I spun around, but the basement was empty, just silence. Instinct told me to run, but I was frozen. My senses heightened. The shadows were moving. Were they alive? I could see wisps of something, swirling like smoke, beckoning me deeper. I was drawn to a glimmer at the far end, a light flickering. I had to know what it was. But as I approached, the cold intensified. A distant moan echoed through the stillness, growing louder. Closing in on me. The light flickered again, revealing a figure standing just out of reach. My stomach dropped. I blinked, but it didn't disappear. It was there, and it was watching. That I felt bile rise in my throat. Who are you?" I stammered. Silence answered. Then, without warning, a loud bang. The door I had entered through slammed shut. Darkness swallowed me whole. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. A scream echoed through the basement. My own. I was alone, yet not alone. The darkness pressed in, cold and suffocating. As dread wrapped around my throat, the figure stepped forward, and I knew this was it. "Help!" I yelled, my voice trembling. But all that came back was the echo of my own fear. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence that followed my scream felt suffocating, as if the very walls of the basement conspired to trap my fear. The figure stood just beyond the flickering light, cloaked in shadow, an abstraction of dread. My heart pounded fiercely, each thud a desperate plea for escape. "Help!" My voice trembled again, a feeble sound swallowed by the oppressive gloom. The figure remained still, as though weighing my fear against its purpose. I strained to see its features, but the flickering bulbs cast a warped light that only deepened the shadows around it. Panic clawed at the edges of my sanity as I felt the reality of my predicament close around me, a living nightmare. Suddenly, the air shifted, the warmth of my breath vaporized into icy tendrils that clawed at my throat. I turned away from the figure, desperate to find a way out, and stumbled into a wall. The cold, damp surface felt clammy beneath my hands, and I began to slide along it, eyes wide in a frantic search for any sign of light, a door, an avenue of escape. There was no chance to question what this apparition wanted or why it had taken residence in the shadows of the train's underbelly. The echo of my footsteps ricocheted against the concrete, erratic and frantic, ripped apart by the low groaning sound that filled the space. It was as if the basement itself was alive, breathing in the terror that loomed within. A shiver raced down my spine when a low hissing filled the air, displacing the silence like a dark breeze. I halted, my breath hitching in my throat. "What do you want?" I croaked, straining to hold on to a shred of courage. Another thud reverberated, clear and deliberate, followed by a rustle that stirred the air like whispers behind my shoulder. I spun around, my pulse a wild drumbeat, and saw the figure now creeping closer, a mass of shadows with elongated limbs and a face obscured by dark tendrils like strands of existence unraveling. I felt bile rise again, a deeply rooted instinct to run, but my legs felt powerless, frozen in place. "Stay away!" I shouted, though the command quivered like a leaf in the wind. It paused, and for a heartbeat, the air went still. I thought I saw its bottomless eyes flicker with a curiosity or perhaps a hunger that turned my stomach. The ground shook slightly beneath my feet, a tremor that seemed to echo my own fear. Then, from the depths of the shadows, a voice emerged, a low, breathy murmur that slithered through the air like fog. "Stay with us," it beckoned, a promise intertwined with threat. "What do you mean?" I gasped, the words barely making it past the tightening in my throat. As if responding directly to my fear, the shadows around us grew darker, swirling like a tempest of despair. Long fingers of darkness reached toward me, and I felt an inexplicable pull, an urge to let go of my defenses and embrace the unknown. No. "Get away from me!" I shouted, fighting against the wave that threatened to engulf me. I backed up blindly against the wall, desperate to avoid its touch, but with each violent thud of my heart, I felt the walls inch closer, focusing my world into a pinprick of light as the figure moved with a purposeful glide. In that moment, I remembered the rules, 5 unbearable rules that had kept me alive on this train, yet they seemed inconsequential now, swallowed by the deepening darkness. The lights above me blinked erratically, and a cacophony of whispers surged around me, filling my mind with promises of liberation, voices that spoke of secrets hidden in the depths, and revelations that would unravel my very essence. Before I could cling to reason, a severe cold wrapped around my face, a tightening grip swirling around my neck like the suffocating embrace of those spectral fingers. With a final scream that burst forth from my lips, the lights extinguished, plunging the world into an abyss. My vision faded, leaving only the chilling weight of something dark enveloping me, and I swore I felt the release of hands holding me, welcome yet terrifying. Then, just as the darkness claimed me completely, I felt the ground beneath me disappear, falling through a void. And in that endless drift, I heard something, a familiar sound suddenly rising above the chaos, flickering like a dying flame, the echo of a train whistle. As realization crept in that I was no longer standing within the basement, but on the precipice of something far more sinister, I felt the air shift again, and a smile spread across the figure's featureless face in the suffocating obscurity. "You'll never leave," it hissed as I fell through the darkness, suspended in an eternity where time held no sway, only the haunting call of the night train that beckoned to all lost souls. When my eyes opened again, the world didn't greet me, it enveloped me in a suffocating haze of darkness. Something cool brushed against my skin, foreign and unsettling, like strands of hair or the remnants of some past life. My breaths came shallow, each inhalation stinging my lungs as the metallic scent of rust and decay clawed at my senses. I was lying on cold cement, the unmistakable odor of mildew wrapped around me like a shroud, yet no flicker of light dared to penetrate this unyielding night. Slowly, I pushed myself up, my trembling hands meeting the ground, fingers splaying across the gritty surface searching for solidity. My heart quickened not from the panic of being lost again, but from a different kind of awareness, a deep, unsettling understanding that I was not alone. "Welcome back," the whisper curled around me like smoke, thick and sweet, like the last memories of a dream fading at dawn. It slithered through my mind, coiling around thoughts, resonating in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. I choked back a scream as I glanced around, the oppressive darkness blurring the edges of the world. A pair of glimmering eyes shot from the abyss, reflecting a scarier truth than I ever dared to dream. They belonged to something unseen, an entity wrapped in shadow, just as before, yet now it felt close, so close I could almost feel its breath against my skin. "Here, with us," the voice purred, a seductive undertone that wrapped around my fear like a warm blanket. It urged me, coaxing my mind to yield to the dread. I fought against it, shoving it aside as I scrambled to find a point of reference. But the walls around me vibrated with an otherworldly resonance, as if some malevolent heart thumped mere inches away, laced with a rhythm akin to breathing. "Who are you?" I croaked, my voice hoarse from fear and something else, an insatiable curiosity that raced beneath my skin, compelling me to seek out the unseen. "Your past, your fears, your memories," the shadows hissed in unison, a haunting choir that felt as ancient as time. "We are echoes of the train of forgotten promise, and we wish to share that." I recoiled. Panic surged anew, but I steadied myself, my logic battling the unfathomable dread creeping closer. A shifting sound reminded me that this labyrinth held more than mere shadows, it carried burdened souls, lost and lingering. Just beyond this field of darkness, the whispers and cries of others resonated, a chorus of suffering far worse than my own. Are they trapped? The question slipped from my lips, tremulous, as fingers of icy terror traced my spine. "The train does not abandon its passengers," the entity intoned, melting away as if dissolving into the ether. "Not while there are stories left to tell." The ground beneath me wobbled, vibrating with urgency. My insides churned, nausea tightening its claws around my throat. I needed to leave. I scrambled toward the far wall, groping blindly for an escape, each footfall echoing into the oppressive silence. Time warped in this surreal plane, minutes or hours, it was impossible to tell. Then, a blinding light burst through the darkness with a furious intensity, pinpoints of illumination scattered like fireflies, illuminating fleeting glimpses of the beings trapped within. Faces twisted in torment, mouths agape in silence, eyes trembling with unshed tears of despair. I stood frozen, caught between horror and revelation, as the light danced in kaleidoscopic patterns, revealing the depth of their anguish. "Join us," they murmured, their voices merging into a haunting unison, beckoning with ghostly fingers that reached toward me from the fringes of their ethereal cages. No. I refuse. I screamed, but the very fabric of my resolve began to fray. A magnetic pull hushed my thoughts, inviting me to step closer to the radiant darkness that encased these lost souls. Each phantom plea for release filled the air, and within that cacophony, I felt something crack deep within. The urge to join them slithered through me, mingling with the deep sorrow of their collective fate. I fell to my knees, a shudder passing through my entire being. Longing for connection, for understanding in this sprawling abyss, yet as I plunged deeper into their lamentations, a sing-song voice broke through the haze. "To leave, you must confront what binds you." Suddenly, the ground quaked again, and fissures of light splintered across the room, revealing skeletal hands reaching up from the Shadowsa sea of despair, clawing upward to grasp at me, willing me to succumb. In that harrowing moment, I realized they were not just echoes of the train, but a reflection of my own mistakes, buried fears clawing at the foundation of my soul. The weight of their sorrow pressed down, and the darkness melted around me, blurring lines of separation. That I was on the precipice, my senses tingling with the sensation of impending doom. My breath hitched as I felt an irresistible pull toward the shadows. The train was not a vessel of escape but a purgatory for souls like mine. With one final desperate cry, I lurched toward the nearest light, hoping to break free, only to find myself engulfed by cold hands rising from the shadows, pulling me relentlessly back, dragging me into the suffocating grip of a collective nightmare. And just as I felt myself disappearing into the void, a voice whispered in my ear, chilling me to the core, "We've been waiting for you." I was suffocated in a realm where time contorted itself, stretching moments into eternity. Just when hope flickered like a desperate flame, it was snuffed out, leaving the spiraling void of despair in its wake. The cold hands that pulled me deeper into the abyss felt clammy and cold, mere remnants of lives long extinguished. Panic surged anew, a primal instinct tethering me to reality as I clawed at the air, gasping for breath. The whispers grew louder, feeding off my fear, wrapping tighter around my consciousness. Join us," each phrase echoed key phrases from my past actions I thought long buried, faces that haunted my memories. I dared not open my eyes, fearing that each flicker of recognition would solidify my descent, yet through the haze, something stung my heart, a flicker of warmth amidst the cold. A shadowed figure drifted into view right in front of me, a woman, her translucent hands reaching out. Recognition coursed through me like a jolt of electricity. It was Sarah, the friend I had lost so many years ago in a reckless accident. Her eyes were wide with a blend of sorrow and the desperate plea of a soul entrapped. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I whispered, my voice trembling under the weight of regret. "Sorry isn't enough," she breathed, her voice a chilling reminder of the pain we had shared and the choices that had led us to this dark rendezvous. "You need to remember what happened that night. You can't escape this." The clamoring shadows around us churned, each face morphing into glimpses of my past, the laughter, the joy, and the crushing devastation I had inflicted upon them. It was a gallery of haunting echoes, and I was but a spectator, shackled by my own transient memories that morphed into living nightmares. "Confront what binds you," Sarah urged, her fingers brushing against my cheek as an icy wind swept around us, a tempest of anguished cries. The shadows twisted, forming a monstrous Shopee solitary train silhouetted against a dim, spectral light. That train, I remembered now. In a reckless moment of teenage abandon, we had sped down those tracks, giggling and shouting, oblivious to the impending darkness. The freezing winter night cloaked us, and in that instance, we didn't see the oncoming train until it was too late. "Sarah!" I gasped, struggling against the hands constricting me, feeling the heart-wrenching grief clawing at my throat. "I never should have let you have to face it," she said, her voice trembling, intertwining with the shadows. "Or we will remain chained here forever, trapped in the echoes of your guilt." As I turned to her, pleading with my eyes, the world began to shift again, the echoes of the train unfolded, playing the scene I had buried. Screaming, panic, and the earth-shattering impact hit me like a tidal wave. I stumbled back, as if thrust into the memory itself. I saw myself as I had been, young, reckless, unburdened, about to make the biggest mistake of my life. The train howled through the night, cutting sharp through the fabric of time. The flashback melded with the darkness, pulling me back as if I were simply a ghost sharing in my own demise, and Sarah was fading. "Remember," she urged, her visage shuddering, the shadows beginning to consume her. "Remember so you can break free." The horrific scene escalated. The screech of metal on metal shouted deafeningly as blurred images merged into one. I screamed, tearing my eyes away, pain coiled within me like a viper, ready to strike. I was faced with the darkness, the train, and the souls it had claimed, yet I felt the sudden, jarring shift. The ground beneath me crumbled and rumbled, wrenching my focus from the memory. Chaos erupted as shadowy shapes flared around us, forming dark angles and sharp edges, their ethereal cries rising to a thunderous pitch. I felt limbs grapple for me, and I was lifted, pulled, and torn apart. "Sarah!" I bellowed, my heart racing in a synchrony of despair and rage. Fear almost blurred my vision, drowning all rational thought, but just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, the oppressive darkness around me cracked open. I glimpsed a pair of eyes larger, more alien than anything I had encountered. They were not just reflecting my fear, they seemed to feasting upon it, echoing the anguish of the lost souls while promising cruel enlightenment. I was suspended in a maelstrom of energies, both haunting and seducing, dragging me further from myself. "Your time is running out," they howled, their voices amalgamating into a cacophony that bore into my very essence. Moments of clarity flickered, Sarah's face fading with desperate longing, the boundaries of the train blurring into ethereal dread. It was all chaos, uncertainty, and fear, but underneath it all, a whisper lingered, a confession boiling beneath the surface. Suddenly, a wrenching sensation gripped my core. The shadows closed in tighter, and then, with an agonizing pull, they thrust me toward the heart of the train's echoing purgatory, where regrets intersected with sins. "Face it, or be consumed by it," the phantoms cried. Forever bound, forever lost. Just then, a different voice, one raspy and monstrous, slithered into my mind like poison. "Your choice, become a conductor of this darkness or fade into nothing." My pulse quickened. With a heart splitting open and too many lives entwined in chains, I realized the weight of the decision that surged upon me, teetering on the edge of sanity and despair. And then the train's whistle blasted through the void like a death knell, a call to the abyss, and the figure of the conductor emerged from the chaotic shadows. It was a familiar silhouette with an unmistakable grin etched onto its pale face. "Welcome aboard," it said, and the world around me pitched into insufferable darkness. The darkness enveloped me, as dense and foreboding as a shroud. I stood before the conductor, his pale face flickering in and out of focus like an old film reel struggling to hold its images. Each second spent encapsulated the terror of what lay ahead, a crossroads that would either set me free or tether me to this nightmare for eternity. "Welcome aboard," he repeated, the grin widening impossibly, as if he relished my impending dread. His voice slithered through the fog, every syllable a thin thread weaving into my mind, an invitation difficult to dismiss. "Your choice, dear traveler, shapes the journey that awaits." The ghosts around me writhed, their whispers mingling, but through the chaos, I locked my eyes onto Sarah, who stood at the edge of my perception, her translucent form flickering like a flame in the wind. "Do not trust him," she implored, her voice barely above a breath, the urgency melting into despair as the conductor's eyes glimmered with a predatory interest that I swallowed hard, my throat constricting under the weight of memories that clawed back to the surface. The train had been a plastic toy of my childhood once, now it carried whispers of death and retribution, a locus of countless regrets. "Choose wisely, for each ticket has a price," the conductor warned, his voice rich with mirth and malice. "Fear, despair, regret, what a delightful currency, and you are absolutely rich." That I dared take a step closer, inching past the thrumming haze that thrummed with agony as the shadows writhed and howled like cornered beasts. I felt a pull toward the figure, and with every heartbeat pulsing through me, the air around us thickened, distorted, electric. The boundaries between this world and the other blurred as more phantoms emerged, faces twisted in anguish, but also in a fragile hope that I could yet save them. "Is this the path you want?" I shouted, voice hoarse with defiance. "To become like you?" The conductor leaned forward, that grin never faltering. "Ah, but do you think you can deny your darkness? You're already halfway there, my fragile friend." And in that moment, as dread chimed within me, I saw the truth that every soul he collected fed into the obsidian machinery of the train, binding them in servitude, creating a cycle of unending despair. They inhabited the very darkness that clawed at me now, tethered to their sins while bound by mine. "Come ride with us," he said beckoningly, extending a long, skeletal hand, his fingernails like talons poised to rend asunder the fabric of fate. "Feel the rush as you descend the tracks of your own making, embracing every mistake, every regret." "What do you say?" The shadows flared, whispering incantations that crept beneath my skin. I felt their tangibility seep into my being, filling me with a tangible dread, a certainty that if I turned away, I would vanish amongst the forgotten. But what did it mean to surrender? What would become of Sarah, and all the others trapped in this nexus of anguish? No. I spat defiantly, pushing through the crushing despair. "I won't be another lost soul," the conductor chuckled, the sound twisting deep in my gut like a serpent coiling. "Fascinating choice. Let's see if you can endure." The air around us crackled and the train roared back to life, lights flickering in a sickening rhythm. It surged forward, the specters swirling like a vortex of light and memory, clutching at me with shadows that howled in agony. The sensation intensified as I was thrust onto the chilling tracks, the jolt reverberating throughout my body. The momentum pulled me along, spiraling down an irreversible path as scenes of regret flashed before my eyes. The car crash, Sarah's laughter, the little boy that had followed in my reckless footsteps, both fates entangled with my own. I felt the sinewy claws of the past twist around me as the train sped into the inky blackness. "Face them." The conductor's voice echoed ominously. "Or surrender to the darkness forever," and in that moment, everything exploded. Shadows morphed into a tempest that swallowed the train. A cacophony of voices clawing at me, a flood of faces blurring to form a warped landscape of cruel laughter punctuated by terrified screams. My heart raced, thundering against the walls of my chest, as the memories surged forth, dragging me deep into the spiral of my own making. Then came the sharpest pain, a realization that struck deeper than the descent itself. I wasn't merely spiraling, I was crashing into another dimension, one I had long since forgotten existed, the dimension of pain I had inflicted on everyone I had ever loved. And just as I descended deeper into this torment, a blinding light exploded from within the folds of darkness, illuminating the paradox that surrounded me. I jolted as I recognized a disembodied hand reaching out from the chaos, not to guide me, but to drag me down further. I caught a fleeting glance in that brilliant burst, a ghostly form more monstrous than anything yet encountered, its eye sockets empty, longing to swallow me completely. "Embrace what you fear most," it howled, its voice echoing through the void. Or watch everyone else fall. I was left drifting, suspended between dimensions of regret and fear, and as a chilling wind swept through the chaos, something stirred behind mesomething sentient that it whispered my name. The whisper cascaded like frigid water down my spine, sending involuntary shivers throughout my being. Danny, it slithered through the darkness, a beckoning that felt both familiar and utterly foreign, as if the abyss itself knew my name. The shadows parted ever so slightly, revealing a corridor lined with flickering lights that pulsed like dying stars. I could feel its bray of the hollow, raspy exhalation that stirred the air even as it filled me with dread. As I turned, dread twisted my stomach. The horrifying shape in the blinding light solidified, its form gnarled and grotesque. It was a face like any other, an exaggerated caricature of anguish, glistening with an oily sheen that reflected the chaos around us. I caught fleeting glimpses of horrors behind it, scenes of missed opportunities cascading like falling leaves, enveloping broken memories and crumbling hopes. "Come closer," it crooned, each word distorted like the soundscape of a carnival lost to time. "I know your secrets, your sins, everything you've tried to forget." "No," I breathed, every instinct screaming to flee, yet every muscle felt weighted, paralyzed by the horror it radiated, the weight of its knowledge pressing on me like a vice. I fought against the invisible thread that bound me to the light, to that insidious temptation wrapped in intimacy, the allure of finally understanding my failures. "But you yearn for release, don't you?" It pressed, tendrils of sorrow curling around my heart. "Release from the burden of guilt. I can take it all away. All you have to do is take my hand." The air grew heavier, saturated with the scent of rotting flowers and decay. I could hear the whispers bloom around me anew, the souls around the train, their plaintive cries mingling with my regrets, their grief spiraling in sharp harmony with the creature's voice. Sarah's face flickered back into focus, but instead of defiance, it melted into an expression of raw sorrow, urging me silently to resist. "We're all prisoners," the being continued, eyes wide, unblinking, a paradox of dark invitation. "But I can open the gate to your freedom. Just embrace your truths." As if in response, the shadows curdled, drawing closer, their throaty wails rising in an ominous crescendo, begging me to step forward. The conductor's sinister laughter gurgled in the distance, echoing the truth of every lost soul eternally bound to their grief. The ground beneath me trembled, a thrum of energy dancing through the rails, a chant of long-forgotten souls ripping at the seams of the veil. With a jolt of resolution born from desperation, I forced myself to retreat. "You're just another lie. You can't take what isn't yours," I shouted, the words tasting bitter as they slipped past my lips. But even as I declared my defiance, I felt the horror at my heels, and I stumbled backward, feeling helpless and exposed in this whirlwind of dread. "Foolish boy," it hissed, voice weaving chilling tendrils around my thoughts. "The darkness doesn't go away. It follows, it feeds on your anguish. You cannot escape it, not now, not ever." Just then, the train screeched, a warble of old metal grating against the unyielding tracks, filling the air with the stench of burning rust. The conductor's visage shifted, his eyes darkened, turning to pools of infinite night that reached into the core of my being. "You've made your choice, and this train only moves forward. Let the darkness engulf you." I clawed at the swirling void, grasping for something solid as the landscape twisted erratically, summoning fleeting memories that flared like dying embers. It played before me a montage of every scream I had ever suppressed, every tear I had wrought. Faces took shape, friends and family, their mouths agape in a nonverbal requiem of accusations and sorrow. Each visage pressed against the limits of my consciousness, and I felt their pain seeping into me like a poison, constricting my breath. "Join me." The wretched creature hissed, its form flickering, distorting into the amalgamation of my failings, the promises broken, the love abandoned. I felt the darkness surge, sentient and greedy, clawing for my core, ready to devour the last flickers of hope. In that moment, fear gripped my heart, the realization that I couldn't fight the torment alone. I turned in despair, searching for Sarah in the chaos, seeking the solitary light amidst the void. But just as I felt her presence faintly radiating against the consuming haze, the train lurched violently, hurling me backward through the oncoming dark, a helpless sacrifice amidst the thrumming waves of regret. I tumbled into an abyss, the weight of despair suffocating me, dragging me into an unsettling silence where no voice could penetrate and no light dared to linger. And then, the world shifted once more. As I hit the ground, the darkness twisted back like a reviving breath, and I realized with mounting horror that I was not alone. Surrounding me, the phantoms closed in, faces contorted with rage and sorrow, mouths stretching into ghastly smiles that dripped with malice. "Danny," they purred in unison, voices intermingling into a cacophony of despair. "You've let us down before. Will you leave us again?" Just as the air turned thick with despair, I felt an unseen force press against me, freezing my thoughts in an instant. The piercing whispers intensified, a storm of sorrow ascending into a singular word that shattered the silence, "always." And with that proclamation, the train hurtled closer, the sound of iron wheels echoing against the endless tracks, as the nightmare spiraled further into chaos, culminating into a reality I could not escape, where shadows breathed my fear, leaving me teetering on the brink of oblivion. The floor shook violently, and I scrambled to my feet, my limbs heavy, as if I were wading through thick syrup. I could barely comprehend the scene unfolding around me. Vague shapes coalesced in the mounting darkness, faces of anguish twisting into grotesque adaptations of their former selves, each one a gaping reflection of my deepest regrets. "Danny," a voice elongated like a thin thread reaching through the shadows, and I recognized it as Sarah's. My heart seized. "You need to wake up. You have to fight." The world tilted then, angles warping, stretching the faces into monstrous exaggerations of sorrow. I refused to look directly at them, but I could feel their eyes on me, judging. The weight of their collective grief was unbearable, suffocating me in a cloud of regret and hopelessness. "Come to us, Danny," they chorused, their voices melding into one husky drone that sent chills rippling through my bones. "We can remember together. We can feel." A sharp jab of fear lanced through me. "Feel what?" I begged, the clamor inside me tearing me apart. "More anguish and betrayal." I took a shaky step back, the ground shifting beneath my feet. The walls of the train compartment pulsed like a living thing, as if the very air I breathed was alive with malign intention. "Don't you see?" One of the figures, a girl with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, edged closer, her hair swirling like smoke around her face. "You belong with us now. You've chosen the darkness. It's the only thing left for you. No. I shouted, a defiance seeping into my voice, but even I doubted my words. Their agony wrapped around me like chains, suffocating, beckoning, promising a release I didn't want. The moment I hesitated, the girl's expression shattered into something monstrous, baring teeth too sharp, too eager. An overwhelming grief washed over me as I remembered everything I'd lost, every moment I had turned my back on those who needed me. Within my chest, guilt and despair morphed into a churning void, echoing the mother's cries and father's rages directed at my retreating figure, and then a sickening realization dawned upon me. This wasn't just solitary torment, these were choices I had made, lives I had unwittingly stained with my neglect. The train rattled violently, the shadows warping and stretching toward me, sharpening into claws that grasped hungrily, almost lovingly, at my spirit. "Danny, don't lose hope." Sarah's voice grasped through the anguish, but instead of a beacon, it felt like an echo lost in a chasm. I cried out for her, drawing her name from the depths of my despair. "Help." I choked on the word, but it felt meaningless, swallowed whole by the gathering darkness clamoring for my essence. The walls shook violently, and suddenly, they split apart like flesh, revealing a gaping maw of shadows swirling hungrily. The figures lunged forward, their hands stretching toward me, fingers stretching and bending in impossible ways, a net of anguish growing tighter. With every inch forward, the whispers spiraled, louder, an impending thunder of accusations and pain rising. "Join us, Danny. Save yourself from the truth." They howled as one, the chorus rising into a crescendo of madness, echoing through the hollowed-out compartments like a funeral dirge. Panic surged within me, a cold wave lapping at the edges of my resolve. I dashed into the void, a desolate attempt to escape, but the boundaries of reality were cruel. The train twisted around me like a serpent, and I stumbled into the space between dreams and despair. Suddenly, I felt a hand icy, burning gripping my wrist, pulling me backward. I turned to see Sarah, her face marred by the shadows that advanced, but her eyes fierce and steady. "Danny, it's time to wake up," she cried, her voice slicing through the maelstrom of whispers. Yet just as her pull anchored me in a fleeting moment of clarity, my world shattered again. From beneath the floor, tendrils of darkness shot up, gripping my legs like chains, dragging me down into the gloom. With every protest I managed to muster, those tendrils wrapped tighter, silencing my defiance. "Let your truth unfold." The figures screamed in manic harmony, their faces flushed with exhilaration, relishing the torment. "It's what you've forgotten." As the shadows continued to drag me into their abyss, my heart thudded in tandem with an insidious, pulsing rhythm. It was then I caught a glimpse of something intensely radiant, a flicker of light, hovering tantalizingly close, barely a breath away. "That's it, Danny," Sarah urged, struggling against the eldritch pull. "If you believe, you can reach it." But as I focused on that fragile ember, the shadows wailed in protest, walls trembling with malevolence. Suddenly, a cacophony erupted, as if the train itself screamed in defiance against my escape. The darkness lunged, voices scraping against my skin like knives, tearing at the very fabric of my being. Just before I lost hold of Sarah's fleeting grip, a voice burst for the new voice, one I didn't recognize but felt painfully close, a malevolent growl that resonated deeply within me. "Danny," it hissed, more a promise than a threat. "Do you really want to know the truth? Or will you succumb to the darkness?" And before I could grasp the implications, the world shattered into intangible fragments, leaving me suspended on the precipice of revelation and oblivion. The last sensation I felt before the abyss swallowed all was the searing heat of despair rushing in, twisting beyond recognition, leaving a terrifying uncertainty of what awaited me in the unfathomable dark. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud, suffocating any remnant of reason. I fell, tumbling into a void that seemed both eternal and instantaneously fleeting. With one last grasping reach toward the light, I landed with a bone-jarring thud in a damp, suffocating place. The air was thick and stagnant, hanging heavy with the scent of decay, and I realized with growing horror that I was no longer on the train, that I was in a corridor, a narrow and twisted hallway dimly lit by flickering bulbs that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Walls lined with peeling wallpaper oozed shadows that slithered away from the flickering light, and I could hear the soft sound of muffled sobs echoing somewhere beyond my sight. Panic surged within me as I struggled to my feet, disoriented and trembling. "Danny," the whisper climbed the walls, curling around corners, an echo of the many voices I had encountered. It beckoned with a chilling familiarity, urging me forward. I recognized Sarah's tone, but there was more to it, a chorus of others, both comforting and haunting. "Stop. Where are you?" I shouted, but my words were swallowed by the oppressive quiet, the kind that thrummed with unease, as if something unseen caught every syllable and threw it back to mock me. The dim corridor around me shifted, the air thickening with an unspeakable dread as I stumbled onward. The faces I had seen on the train flitted through my mind, their expressions now steely, filled with a resolve that cut deeper than any blade. They were not here to merely haunt me, they were here to guide me towards something darker. Just as I reached for the nearest door, the air hummed, vibrating ominously. I paused, hesitating, but it was as if the corridor itself urged me forward, whispering promises and secrets unspoken, that I grasped the handle. It turned with a sickening squish, as though it was drenched in the very essence of regret. The door opened into a vast room cloaked in shadows, and the flicker of lights cast grotesque silhouettes around me. The sobs grew louder, a cacophony of sorrow wrapping around my mind like a vice. "Danny." Sarah's voice pierced through, clear yet layered with anguish. "You have to close your eyes and listen." Closing my eyes felt wrong, and yet, compelled, I obeyed, allowing the darkness to envelop me fully. The world fell away, leaving only the isolation of my own heartbeat pounding in sync with the mournful cries. As I listened, the sobs began to morph and rise in intensity, transforming into desperate pleas, frantic gasps, the sounds of lives torn apart, woven into the air with a savage urgency. "Open your heart, Danny. Remember." The voices cried out, fraying at the edges, blurring the lines between reality and torment. I felt the weight of their collective grief, a tidal wave crashing over the frail dam of my resolve. Memories flooded my mind, faces of loved ones lost, moments of abandonment, squandered chances, each one sharper than the last. With every heartbeat, the memories morphed into horrific visions: Sarah, her face marred by despair, friends I had betrayed or neglected, even strangers I had turned my back on in their time of need. The room trembled, shadows deepening, coiling around my ankles like serpents eager to drag me down into their depth. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, searching for the flickering light I had glimpsed earlier, but it seemed far gone, swallowed by the heavy darkness threatening to consume me whole. Danny. Each voice surrounded me, urging me to uncover my truth. You must see. With a tentative stealing of breath, I pried my eyes open, and the moment I did, the room erupted around me. Shadows birthed grotesque forms, threads of darkness becoming articulated horrors that lunged forward. Some were reminiscences of faces I once knew, twisted and angry, while others were unknown beings, their mouths stretching too wide, revealing impossible grins that promised endless suffering. You chose this, Danny. They screamed in unison, each syllable crackling with fury. You could have saved us. I staggered back, colliding with the wall, the cold dampness seeping into my back. My heart hammered as I realized the truth in their words, a sickening climax of Clarissa reckoning of my own failures. Each creature closing in was a residual echo of my past, each one demanding its reckoning, each face pleading for justice I never gave, and just when I thought I could find my footing in the chaos, something surged from behind me, a searing heat that felt both familiar and absolute. I turned, heart racing, only to find an apparition standing before me, a visceral haze shifting and changing form. It was the last being I ever wanted to see. Danny. The voice slithered through the air, like smoke folding over itself until its true form materialized, a reflection of my worst nightmare. Sarah? I whispered, the name escaping my lips as if it were a gasp for air. Her visage wavered, eyes clouding with sorrow and fear, tethered to the writhing darkness beside her. You must answer for what you've done. Her voice rippled, twisted by conflicting emotions. Your darkest choice is closer than you think. My breath hitched as I backed away, the shadows thrumming around us like an impending storm. Just then, the ground beneath me cracked, a chasm splitting wide, threatening to swallow everything, including the glimmers of light from my fleeting memories. I had no choice but to choose between the enduring agony of recollection or plunge into the depths, where horror awaited. Will you face your truth, or will you let the darkness consume you? Sarah's spectre, torn by grief, held her ground, eyes piercing through the encroaching shadows. And in that painful moment, with the abyss yawning beneath me, I realized I was on the verge of making the most dreadful choice of all. The chasm swelled beneath me, a void ready to swallow my frail existence, and all I could think of was escape. Reason warred against instinct, clawing at my throat as I felt the shadows biting at my ankles, whispering promises of despair and oblivion. I looked back at Sarah, but her face was already fraying, the edges of her being dissolving into the darkness. Danny. You have to choose. She cried, but her voice faded into a dissonant echo, swallowed by the cacophony around us. My heart raced. I was drowning in a sea of regret, each wave carrying moans of lost souls who ached for resolution. I could hear their whispers clearly now, scraping against my mind like nails on a chalkboard, each voice melting into the next. The memories pressed closer, driving me towards the precipice, reminding me of my choices. My cowardice, fear and guilt grasped me with icy fingers, constricting my resolve. I was not just a participant in this dance of shadows, I was the architect of the horror that unraveled before me. The memories distorted further, grotesque forms reaching for me, faces pleading with me to remember who I was and what I had forsaken, a sickening reminder of the life I had cast aside for fleeting moments of selfishness. Open your heart, Danny. Before it's too late. The echoing chorus surged, each word a knife, deepening the wound of my conscience that I wavered, the abyss beckoning me with a promise of escape and silence, yet deep down, I felt the undeniable truth: if I took that plunge, my reality would slip beyond reach, rending the final threads of remorse I clung to. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs were anchored to the ground, ensnared by the very shadows that pulsed with malignancy. Suddenly, from the depths of that swirling darkness, shapes began to unfurl, twisted limbs and gnarled faces emerged, morphing into something so intimate and terrifying that bile rose in my throat. They were the lost echoes of my past who had walked this very corridor before me, now transformed into grotesque parodies of their former selves, anguished figures tethered to my choices. Danny, help us! They wailed in unison, a chorus of betrayal that resonated deep within my core. Each cry pricked at the remnants of my empathy, threatening to tear open the festering wound of my guilt. Then, like an iron grip upon my senses, the shadows stirred and swirled with a new vigor, coiling around me insistent, suffocating. The apparition of Sarah, now flickering like a candle caught in a gust, reached out, her arms stretching impossibly long, twisting towards the darkness as though trying to stave off the vortex threatening to seize everything in its clutches. Danny, there isn't much time. Her voice was firm yet filled with longing, an echo of both the love and loss I avoided all this time. You need to choose the light. Choose to face what you've done, but the thought of what lay beyond the chasm was terrifying. Would it be the judgment I feared? Could I bear to confront my greatest regrets, the face of each soul I had failed? The memories began ripping themselves free from the eternal torment, thrusting images of pain and heartache into my mind, moments I would rather forget but were now screaming for recognition. Every hesitation only deepened the chasm's pull, a dark maw that sought to consume me whole. I could feel the edges of reality unraveling around me, the corridor itself warping, twisting into shapes as grotesque as the horrors lurking within. I looked back at Sarah, and for one fleeting second, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Danny, jump! She cried, a fierce desperation igniting in her gaze, but before I could weigh my options, the ground split wider, the shadows shrieked in maddening urgency, and the air thickened with dread. I hesitated no longer, I leaped towards that elusive light, extending my arms wide, heart pounding, ready to embrace whatever awaited me, but just as my feet left the edge of darkness, I felt the cold grip of a million vengeful hands wrap around my ankles, dragging me back toward the void. My scream shattered the silence, echoing backward into oblivion as the shadowy forms grasped me tighter, yearning for their retribution. Danny. Sarah's voice rang out, a desperate plea intermingling with the abyssal wails. Remember, and in that moment, with the weight of the whole world teetering on the precipice between light and darkness, I finally realized, the truth I had buried was far more terrible than the fate that awaited me. I was on the brink of discovering that sometimes, facing the past means confronting horrors worse than death itself. The abyss opened wider, ready to swallow me whole, and I felt the anguished cries draw closer, wrapping around me like a noose, one last secret waiting to shatter everything I thought I knew. A blinding flash pierced through the darkness, illuminating the grotesque figures, momentarily revealing their true forms, the very souls I had wronged, their eyes locking onto mine with a mix of betrayal and need. And just as I thought I had finally transported into the light, a voice emerged from the depths of that unfathomable darkness, deep and resonant, gliding through the air like a serpent. Welcome home, Danny. The chilling finality of those words sent a new wave of horror crashing over me, as I plummeted into the furious void, knowing no escape awaited me. The train wails mournfully, its horn echoing in the distance like a ghostly lament. I find myself wrapped tightly in the darkness, a pulsating mass that breathes in rhythm with my frantic heart. I am no longer just a passenger, I am entwined in an eternal spiral of misery, an unwitting conductor orchestrating the suffering that surrounds me. With an effort fueled by desperation, I claw my way to consciousness, and as my eyes flutter open, the dim light reveals that I am back in the basement, a malicious labyrinth of anguished whispers and shadows. Except now, the walls are sticky with memories, writhing like living entities hungry for escape. Every flicker of light exposes twisted faces straining against the weight of despair, pleading for release. No, I mutter as flashes of recognition engulf me. Each visage blurs into the next, a fevered dream of guilt and sorrow woven with the anguish of those I failed. Please, let me leave. But even as I articulate the words, I know they carry no weight here. A dark figure watches me from the shadows, the familiar silhouette of the conductor with his sinister smile. The moment catches in my throat, the reality of my choices crash over me like waves, dragging me deeper into a sea of regret. You can't escape, Danny, he whispers, his voice wrapping around my soul like a serpent. You chose the train, and it chose you. I back away, dread pooling in my stomach as more figures surge forth, friends, family, faces I've wronged, all lost souls I abandoned, their mouths silent but their eyes screaming with the pain only I can see. They stretch their hands out, not to pull me back, but to urge me forward into their torment. I stagger, fighting the urge to succumb to their call, knowing I must face them. Danny, face your truth. Sarah's voice cuts through the fog, a beacon amidst the malevolence. You have to face them. But each step toward her feels like walking through quicksand, memories pressing in on me. I cringe as their silent cries pierce my psyche, each one a stabbing reminder of what I've done, what I've lost. No. Stop. I cry, falling to my knees. I'm sorry. I thought my words dissolve into the surrounding darkness, their fury manifesting as a low growl that reverberates through the air. Thoughts cannot save you now, Danny. You've abandoned us for too long. A chorus of murmurs shifts around me, each voice like knives digging deeper into my soul. Suddenly the ground beneath me shakes, splintering into a gaping maw as the shadows converge, frantic in their need for recognition. The whispers crescendo, growing louder, their chants demanding my attention like a wildfire consuming the fragile threads of hope. Join us. They scream as one, an imploring plea intertwined with a viral rage. I plunge into their chaos, surrendering to the shattering truth of the night when I chose speed and recklessness over safety, when laughter morphed into horrified screams and lives were extinguished in an instant. The train crash resurfaced, clawing its way through my mind, vivid and unforgiving. Heavy breaths escape my lips as I look up to find their faces, pleading, Sarah among them, her expression a mirror of remorse and encouragement. You know what you need to do. The phantoms beseech. I shake my head, tears streaming down my face. No. You can't blame me for face it, Danny. Shouted Sarah. You're not just a passenger on this train, you're the cause. The shadows swell around me, branching out into a swirling storm, and I reel backward as the truth crashes down upon me like a tidal wave. I had tried to run from the weight of my guilt, but I see it. No, it was never just their pain, it was mine too. As realization floods my senses, I come to an understanding. The train is not a vessel of transport but an echo of my regret, an extension of my soul perpetually locked into this haunting cycle of abandonment and suffering. The passengers were not just victims, they were reflections of who I failed to be, pinned in a moment of time that I could not change. With each erratic heartbeat, I face the shadows, and an overwhelming urge surges. Within me a need to confront this darkness head-on. No more running. I accept my truth. I accept my sins. I shout, the words cascading from my throat like a baptism of fire. From the depths of those ghastly shadows, I feel a chill subside, the grip of despair reluctantly loosening. The figures around me begin to shift, their sorrow melting into a collective sigh. I realize they are not just echoes of what was, but parts of who I could still be. Thank you, they whisper, a flicker of relief weaving through the darkness. You've finally chosen to remember. As the shadows swirl around me, for the first time, I look into their haunted eyes and see not only the ghosts of my mistakes but the path to redemption. I stand tall amidst the wreckage of my past, knowing I must lead them away from this torment, free them from the chains that bind their souls to my mistakes. Their memories interlaced with mine, the shadows encircle me, slowly solidifying into the train compartment, yet filled with unfamiliar warmth. With every whisper I hear their gratitude, a symphony of lost voices threaded with hope. And then, the conductor appears once more, grinning, his pallid face harboring nothing but dark glee. You think you can escape? He mocks, but my resolve holds firm. Not all shadows can claim us. I shout back, defiantly stepping forward. The train shudders, as if frozen in time, and with newfound strength, I reach out to clasp Sarah's hand. We are not defined by our regrets. Let's take this train home. And as I claim my rightful place, the darkness begins to recede, dissipating like smoke in the wind, leaving behind a flicker of luminosity, an ethereal glow illuminating the path ahead. But as I step forward, a chilling laughter echoes from the shadows once more, resonating with sinister glee as the conductor leans in closer, whispering just out of reach. You may save them, but your darkness will always ride along. As the light intensifies, I shiver, realizing the truth. That lingers like a specter on the precipice of my salvation. Even when freed, some darkness never truly leaves. The night train will always follow, waiting for the moment when despair strikes again, and with that last haunting thought, I step into the glimmering dawn, but I cannot shake the feeling of a presence behind, a reminder that some trains never truly stop running.